Welcome in on a Friday. I'm Juliette Goodrich. Helene isn't finished just yet. We're tracking the tropical storm moving through the south after it was the strongest hurricane on record to slam into Florida's Big Bend. Plus, just days away from the vice presidential debate, we will introduce you to the rules for the very first time here on CBS News 24/7. Let's go. We have more hurricane coverage coming up, but we want to take you to New York, where New York City Mayor Eric Adams has pleaded not guilty to all 5 federal charges, including bribery and wire fraud. So you can see here Adams arriving at the New York courthouse for his arraignment earlier today. The charges have rocked the city, with lawmakers and residents calling for his immediate resignation. His lawyers spoke just moments ago addressing the charges, so take a listen.
I don't have anything further today, and thank you all.
Calls on you to resign, will you?
Mr. Mayor, what you
Mr. Mayor, how you feeling?
that you destroyed evidence.
CBS News national correspondent Nikki Batiste is outside the courthouse in New York City. And Nikki, you were there just as he was coming out from that hearing. So walk us through what you saw and what you heard just moments ago.
Juliette, I was actually inside the courtroom for the hearing, and I'll tell you a little bit about what struck me being in that courtroom. We've heard Mayor Adams be so vocal in the last few days, yesterday speaking after the indictment came out. But inside that courtroom, he was straight-faced. He sat and looked straight ahead at that judge for the entire duration of his arraignment. Briefly talked to his lawyers once. He gave the not guilty plea, as we know. He said, "I am not guilty, Your Honor." When he walked out, which is, we're so used to seeing defendants walk out sometimes in handcuffs out the side of a courtroom, he walked right out where everyone else was. He walked right by me, again, straight-faced and stoic, Juliette.
Okay, so what happens now while he waits for his next court appearance?
So his next court appearance, which we just learned, will be Wednesday here at the courthouse, 9:30, a status hearing. His lawyer did say in court, "We want a trial as soon as possible." He asked for all the discovery in the case by that hearing coming up on Wednesday. So they want to get this moving. Juliette.
All right, Nikki Batiste, thanks for your observations inside the courtroom and as he was walking out. Appreciate it. All right, moving on, bringing up our Tennessee map now. Helene is now a tropical storm making its way through the area. So this is what it looks like in eastern parts of the state. You can see right there, Helene was a Category 4 hurricane when it made landfall over Florida's Big Bend last night. So it caused a lot of damages in places like Perry, which you can see here. And so far, at least 22 people have been killed as a result of the storm across several states. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis spoke earlier this morning and says first responders from all over are helping on the ground.
Search and rescue operations were conducted to help people that were in distress and transport them to safety. These missions continue, but we've had thousands of missions successfully completed in the overnight hours throughout the state. This is our local first responders. This is local in conjunction with state assets and state assets directly going in and effectuating rescues, and that's the National Guard, that's Florida Fish and Wildlife, that's all the assets we had available to help support these rescue efforts, and all the calls that any state officials responded to last night. We were able to find the person or people and pets and bring them to safety. And so that's a contrast from some of the things that we saw, for example, at Hurricane Ian. Now it's still early. They're going to have those folks who were responding to those calls. They're going to be doing broader search and rescue in those areas that did get hit with significant storm surge and see if there's any other problems or if there's any folks that are still left behind.
Our video feeds take you to some of those areas. You can see here what the governor was talking about. This is a water rescue in Citrus County, Florida. You can see the rescuers there just carrying one of the residents to safety out of all of the floodwaters there. Certainly a lot going on in this effort to help the people in the area there. Meteorologist Jessica Birch has been covering this. Jess, what do you know so far?
You know, millions of people right now in the south are without power. The death toll is now over 20, and we continue to keep a close eye all throughout Florida and throughout the south as the storm is still wreaking havoc over areas from Kentucky all the way over into Tennessee. Here's what's happening. This storm went under rapid intensification as it moved its way throughout the Gulf. It brought heavy rain and wind all throughout Florida, and here's where it's currently at as we head right now into the next 24 hours. Rapid intensification means that system hit some of the most warm sea surface temperatures on record down in the south, and that's what caused the storm to gain strength up to a Category 4 by the time it made landfall last night, devastating communities widespread throughout the south. Taking a look behind me, I want to dive into where it's at. It's now started to decay. Inevitably, that's going to happen as it moves its way over land, starting to weaken right now, but max sustained winds are still around 45 miles per hour as it continues to push north, now into communities anywhere from Tennessee all the way over into the Carolinas. As we head into the coming days, we're going to continue to monitor this, but you know, as we head into the next couple of days, the big concern has to do now with freshwater flooding all throughout those regions where heavy rainfall is still expected, and we continue to keep a close eye on what that's going to do for those regions as well.
Yeah, Jess, it's the days after especially that is hard, especially with the rescues as well. So we do have Ken Graham joining us now for more information on Helene, and he is the director of NOAA's National Weather Service. Ken, thanks for joining us. You have Jessica Birch and myself, Juliette Goodrich, here asking you some questions. First and foremost, this largest hurricane to hit the Big Bend region. Any indication of what to expect to come now?
You know, it's interesting. We're not done with this event yet. I mean, if you think about some of the storm surge areas that we had around Tampa up towards the Big Bend in Florida, it's an ongoing event. I mean, we're seeing all the hazards associated with these hurricanes take place. We had the storm surge, large storm. I mean, if you think about the size of the storm, we had tropical storm force winds out 350 miles. So there's places, Tampa Bay, think about more than 6 foot of storm surge 100 miles away from the center. So that's one of the hazards. Of course, we had the wind, especially around that eye wall. So incredible amount of damage and power outages, but ongoing flash flooding. Historically, these systems cause so much inland damage, and that threat continues for portions of western North Carolina and upstate South Carolina up into Tennessee. Just a dangerous situation when it comes to the water.
And the storm became a massive system in such a short amount of time. So how can people prepare for storms like this in the future?
It's interesting with the big storms. You know, most people think of these hurricanes, you know, crossing the Atlantic and lots of notice. Every single storm, I look at the Cat 5, for example, the most powerful storms, every one of those Cat 5s that have hit this country was a tropical storm or less 3 days out. So this one being a Cat 4 at landfall, 140 miles per hour, another one of those that don't give a lot of time. But I tell you, it was right on our forecast on Monday. Our very first forecast was only about 40 miles off from where it hit. That's staggering how far the science has come. The better the forecast, the more time we have to prepare for the hazards.
Yeah, thanks to all of our meteorologists. All right, Ken Graham, thank you so much for that information. So let's take you all there. CBS News national correspondent Dave Malkoff has been standing in water all day from Atlanta. And Dave, at one point, we saw that you were waist deep in water. Conditions changing now, but what's heading now as Helene is now moving north?
It is, Juliette, and the water has receded quite a bit here, but we're still in an ongoing situation that's happening right here as, you know, we've got a sad update for you that Governor Brian Kemp just said that 11 people have been killed in this storm just here in Georgia. That puts it over 20 people throughout Georgia and Florida. So most of those deaths were south of us, but there's still a big problem here in the Atlanta area. Juliette, last time we talked like this, we were in Francine, and we had a wind event. Remember that that whole store was ripped apart. And this is now a flooding event from all the water that dumped on top of us here in Atlanta. This is the first time in a very, very long time that we had tropical storm force winds and a tropical storm itself coming on top of us in Atlanta, dumping all this water here. I just talked to a woman who lives over here, and her name is Selena. And she was, Julia, get this, she was sleeping in her bed, and she woke up and her mattress was floating in the bedroom. Naturally, what everyone would think is this is kind of a weird dream that I'm having right now, some kind of a nightmare. But then she came to and realized that this is real life, and she got out of her house, walked over there, and she's been out of the house until right now. Now she walks in and she's kind of mucking out everything inside of her house, trying to get all the water out of there, but it is still underwater here in Atlanta.
Yeah, Dave, that is the big concern now, cleaning all of that up, and you explained just what she woke up to. I'm curious, in that particular area, were people told or warned to clear out?
They didn't know that it was going to be this bad. They knew that there could be possibly some flooding happening here. We do have a creek, there's the Peachtree Creek that goes right through here. But they didn't know that not only was the Peachtree Creek going to swell, but then we'd have this huge fire hose of rain come on top of us. And at one point, this car was covered in water, Juliet, to up to here, so you can see exactly how high the water got. All those cars were underwater. There is, and you can't see it because of this black car right here, but there's a motor scooter that's back there that I didn't see until right now. There are people who have pulled their neighbors out of the apartments here. There's an 83-year-old man who lives right in this apartment right here, and his neighbor who lives above in the area that didn't get flooded. She pulled him up there, and he slept the night at his neighbor's house. We talked to at least 2 people who have done just that. And so it's neighbors helping neighbors. There have been ongoing rescues, not only from the Urban Search and Rescue Team, but from just people who have boats, Juliet, people in the neighborhood who have canoes and little boats, and they've been going back and forth, shepherding pets and people and belongings back and forth. But now as the water is receding a little bit, people can kind of walk through this. But this is a very serious situation here in Atlanta and in Georgia, where we have 11 people who are dead. We've got down power lines, down trees, roads that are blocked, and entire neighborhoods that are underwater.
Yeah, you do see the heart of the area as people are helping people. Dave, I appreciate you giving that walkthrough with us. Thank you so much. Let's now take you to other parts. Our video feed showing you it's not just Georgia. So take a look at this. This is Sarasota. This is from above. You can see just the street and all of the flooding in that area. Obviously, people cleared out, and the flooding just happening moments ago, 7:41 a.m. This is our video feeds showing you that from the Sarasota Police Department camera. And about 90 miles away from there, this aerial shot, it gives you a view of the streets in Treasure Island. What a mucky mess that is. The cleanup will continue for some time. And then take a look at the streets that are flooded in Citrus County. We actually caught a person that was going through the waters with a kayak. Sometimes we see that during these situations. Our video feeds also caught damage in South Carolina. We take you there. 2 people are fortunately safe now, but look at this. Their home was right in the middle of this tree that fell right on top of the home, and the people inside are okay. We're happy to report that. And as expected, Helene's damage is leaving a lot of people without power right now, big time. So this map shows you millions across the Southeast that are just in the dark, and over 1 million customers are also hoping to get their lights back on soon in Florida. So you can see here, a majority of those are in the Big Bend area, where Helene made landfall. Okay, here is a view of where the outages are just north of that in Georgia. Also, 1 million customers without power. Helene is still having a big effect on travel, so take a look at this. This map is from the website FlightAware. It shows you all the planes in the sky as we speak, and a lot of flights were canceled today, grounded, most with cancellations happening in Charlotte's airport, understandably. So we are just days away. Coming up from the vice presidential debate, a lot more from our video feeds here. We're going to introduce you to the rules for the very first time right here on CBS News 24/7. More ahead. We'll see you soon. You're watching CBS News 24/7. In just a few days, Governor Tim Walz and Senator J.D. Vance will face off on the biggest stage of their political careers. CBS News is hosting the first and likely only vice presidential debate on Tuesday in New York. So here are some of the rules. The debate will be 90 minutes and no one will be in the audience. Questions and topics will not be shared to candidates ahead of the debate. Each candidate will get 2 minutes to answer a question and the other will get 2 minutes to respond. Each candidate will also have 2 minutes for closing statements. CBS News 24/7 is covering both campaigns today. CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camilo Montoya Galvez is traveling with the Harris-Walz team. But let's begin with CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian. And Nicole, after some back and forth, former President Donald Trump did meet with Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky just this morning. He talked to reporters ahead of today's sit-down. We want to play some of that sound for us all.
We have a very good relationship. And I also have a very good relationship, as you know, with President Putin. And I think if we win, I think we're going to get it resolved very quickly. I really think we're going to get it resolved.
I hope we have more good relations.
We're going to have. Oh, I see. Yeah, but you know, it takes two to tango. You know, and we will. We're going to have a good meeting today. And I think the fact that we're even together today is a very good sign. And
all right, former President Trump meeting with Zelensky. I caught a little bit of that audio. He said it takes two to tango. But Nicole, why don't you tell me what else was happening in that meeting?
Well, you know, this is interesting dynamic that the former president and Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky met simply because the two have kind of traded criticisms in the last couple of days and weeks here. And even as recently as yesterday, House Speaker Mike Johnson essentially snubbed Zelensky by not meeting with him, even though he was on Capitol Hill. Some House Republicans have criticized a visit he recently made to a Pennsylvania ammunition factory. And, of course, the former president has also been critical of Zelensky in terms of sometimes being critical, for instance, of the need for additional funding in Ukraine, which we also have seen sometimes impact the Republican position on Capitol Hill. But that being said, as you heard from him there, it sounded like it was a very good meeting. And he does say that he believes that this war should end, that it shouldn't have started. However, when CBS News pressed the former president on what that would look like, he said that he's not going to say what that would look like. So, you know, still a little short on details in terms of what his proposal would be. But that being said, certainly significant that the two leaders did have that face-to-face today in New York.
And Nicole, you are in Michigan where Trump will hold a campaign event later today. So what is he expected to focus on during the event?
Well, this is his 10th visit here to battleground Michigan, a state that remains very close right now between the former president and Vice President Kamala Harris. And really a big chunk of what he will talk about, not only outside of Grand Rapids a short time from now and also here in Warren, Michigan, is the economy. Of course, that still continues to be a dominant theme among both candidates and a big concern among voters, but particularly with respect to the economy, concerns about inflation, although there were some new numbers today showing that it may be slowing. And of course, Warren, Michigan is significant because there was an auto plant that closed here a couple of years back. And so, of course, those who support Harris and UAW held a call earlier today suggesting that the former president hasn't done enough in terms of helping the auto industry, even though the former president often suggests that the auto industry has been left behind. But that certainly is top of mind for a lot of folks here. The former president, for his part, though, expected to speak here later tonight before traveling down to Alabama tomorrow for a football game.
Nicole Kelly and Nicole, thank you. All right, our video feed's now taking us to Camilo. Vice President Kamala Harris taking immigration head on today with her trip to the U.S.-Mexico border. Thanks for joining us. Quick question. She released a new campaign ad ahead of her stop in Arizona. Can you address that?
Hi, Juliet. Yes, Vice President Harris is coming here to Douglas, Arizona for her first trip to the U.S.-Mexico border as a presidential candidate, and she is scheduled to be briefed by Customs and Border Protection officers on fentanyl interdictions here along the U.S.-Mexico border at an official legal entry point. And these are the official crossings where most of the illicit drugs, including fentanyl, are smuggled into the country, mostly by legal travelers, including U.S. citizens, not necessarily migrants who are claiming asylum. And of course, the fentanyl crisis, Juliet, as you know, has claimed the lives of tens of thousands of Americans in recent years. But the Biden administration has faced another major challenge here at the U.S.-Mexico border, and that is the unprecedented levels of migration here over the past 3 years that has really upended the politics of immigration in this country and created scenes of chaos and really made a political headache for the Biden administration. But the situation here, importantly, has changed dramatically in recent months after President Biden took action to severely curtail access to the U.S. asylum system. Illegal border crossings have now plummeted to a 4-year low after those stringent measures took effect. And we can expect the Vice President, Juliet, to talk about these tougher policies to champion more stringent measures at the border, including that bipartisan border security deal that was scuttled in Congress after it did not have sufficient Republican support. She will likely accuse former President Donald Trump, her rival, of course, in this race, of scuttling that deal and tanking it purely for political reasons.
Camilo Montoya Galvez. Camilo, thank you. Appreciate that. And don't forget to join us Tuesday for live coverage of the CBS News Vice Presidential Debate, co-moderated by Norah O'Donnell and Margaret Brennan. We will have coverage starting with a special edition of America Decides at 4 p.m. Eastern, with the debate starting at 8 p.m. Eastern right here on CBS News 24/7. Up next, Benjamin Netanyahu defended his country's response to the October 7th attacks by Hamas in his speech to the UN. Coming up, CBS News foreign correspondent Chris Livesay joins us live from Tel Aviv. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. Jumping the map to New York. Demonstrators took to the streets in Manhattan today as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed world leaders at the United Nations General Assembly. Netanyahu defended his country's response to the October 7th attacks by Hamas and brought the families of some of the hostages still being held in Gaza to the UN. Netanyahu opened his speech saying he wanted to set the record straight and says Israel will not stop its fight until all of the hostages return home.
I didn't intend to come here this year. My country is at war, fighting for its life. But after I heard the lies and slanders leveled at my country by many of the speakers at this podium, I decided to come here and set the record straight. And here's the truth. Israel seeks peace. Israel yearns for peace. Israel has made peace and will make peace again. Yet we face savage enemies who seek our annihilation, and we must defend ourselves against these savage murderers. As for the hostages, I have a message for the Hamas captors. Let them go. Let them go. All of them. Those alive today must be returned alive, and the remains of those whom you brutally killed must be returned to their families.
CBS News foreign correspondent Chris Livesay joins us live from Tel Aviv. So, Chris, thanks for joining us. What stood out to you from Netanyahu's speech?
Hey, Juliet. Well, he really used his speech also as an opportunity to point the finger at Iran. He said, he called them a curse. He pointed out their affiliation with Hamas over and over again and with Hezbollah. And specifically dealing with Hezbollah, he said, enough is enough. He was referring to the more than 11 months in which Hezbollah has been lobbing rockets across the border with Israel, forcing up to 70,000 Israelis to flee their homes. And of course, this is in response to the ongoing airstrikes that Israel has been launching for about the past week now on the Hezbollah strongholds in southern Lebanon. Enough is enough. They can't take it anymore. And he made it clear that they're not going to stop anytime soon.
So, Chris, just moments ago, Deputy Pentagon Press Secretary Sabrina Singh gave us an update about an Israeli airstrike in Lebanon. Let's listen to this.
The United States was not involved in this operation, and we had no advanced warning. Minister Gallant spoke with Secretary Austin as the operation was already underway. This operation happened within the last few hours. We are still assessing the event and don't have any additional information or any further specifics to provide at this time. But with that, I'd be happy to take your questions. I don't see AP in the room. I'm going to go to the phone and then happy to come back. Lita Baldor, AP.
Hi, thanks, Sabrina. A couple questions on Iraq. Will all of the...
Okay, so Chris, what can you tell us about this latest attack?
Well, so it appears as though it was an attack that was targeting the leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah. Israel has confirmed it was indeed targeting the headquarters of Hezbollah, and it's in these headquarters where Hassan Nasrallah is often spending his time. However, the suspicion has been that Nasrallah would have evacuated this location sometime last week, shortly after those calamitous explosions of pagers and walkie-talkies for Hezbollah that we witnessed, killing hundreds and wounding thousands, followed by the targeted killings of the top military leadership of Hezbollah. So if he was still in these headquarters, that would absolutely be surprising. But if indeed he was killed, the effect would be seismic on the region. Hassan Nasrallah has led this Iran-backed group for more than 30 years. According to Israeli media, in order to get him inside of these headquarters, they would have had to use bunker buster bombs because it was a location that was underneath residential buildings. According to Israel, they did that to hide behind civilians. This is an Iran-backed group. If the head of this group has indeed been killed, the big question is, how will Iran respond? And that sparks big fears of a wider conflict, because then you would also have to wonder, to what extent could the United States get dragged into this conflict and see a much bigger, a much deadlier war than we've seen up until now.
Chris Livesay, CBS News foreign correspondent. Chris, thank you. Up next, we take you back down to Florida after Helene made landfall as a Category 4 hurricane. CBS News correspondent Tom Hansen will join us live from Tallahassee. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Watching CBS News 24/7, our live feeds taking you to Tennessee now. Helene, now a tropical storm, making its way through the state. So this is what it looks like in Nashville. The storm making a mess across the South. So take a look at this. This is what it looks like in Atlanta right now. It just streets covered in water that's muddy, all of the trees around, and a lot of people had to evacuate that area. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp spoke earlier today about the conditions in his state. Let's take a listen.
At this time, this has been a deadly storm. We've had 11 confirmed fatalities. I would ask all Georgians, like the Kemp family's doing, to keep these folks in these communities in your thoughts and prayers. We know that one of those was a first responder. When we ask people to stay off the roads and be patient, it's because we are trying to get to people. It is a very dangerous environment, and one of our finest has lost his life trying to save others. Our priority is getting to medical emergencies in facilities like hospitals, nursing homes, and others that need critical help and don't have power.
Meanwhile, Helene was a Category 4 hurricane when it made landfall over Florida's Big Bend last night. This is what it looks like now. This is Treasure Island. And so far, at least 22 people have been killed as a result of the storm across several states. Let's go now to meteorologist Jessica Birch for the latest. Jess?
Let's take a look at where it's at, because, yeah, as it entered the Gulf of Mexico, it dealt with some of the warmest sea surface temperatures on record just south of Florida. That's the reason why that rapid intensification happened. That's the reason why it hit landfall last night, devastating millions at a Category 4 level. Here's where it's at right now. It continues to decay inland in areas over Kentucky, stretching all the way over into Tennessee. And throughout the next couple days, we're going to continue to watch the major impacts in those communities where this system has been continuing to bring in damaging winds, hurricane force winds still stretched into the Carolinas, and to add to that, of course, storm surge was the big concern, and now freshwater flooding is the concern as it sits directly over the state of Kentucky as it decays over this weekend's forecast. This is going to last throughout Saturday and Sunday with heavy downpour in these communities. We can see anywhere up to around 20 inches of rainfall in local communities as that system continues to sit directly over that state. Futurecast showing this perfectly. Here's what we're looking at as we head into Friday evening. Notice that circulation. Winds still up to around 45 miles per hour right now just in the center. They're starting to slow down, yes, but that's not to say that that rain's just going to disappear. No, it's going to fall into those local communities. That's the reason why we have flood watches and warnings lasting throughout the afternoon hours today, anywhere from Atlanta stretched up into Roanoke and all the way over into Nashville too. Rainfall on average, yes, close to around 6 to 12 inches, but like I said, we can see isolated numbers up to around 20, and tornado concerns are a big issue just along the Carolinas as well. So we will continue to monitor this monster of a storm as we head into the weekend forecast.
Yeah, the warnings certainly were there, but it doesn't help when it's hitting everybody so hard right now. All right, Jess, thank you. CBS News correspondent Tom Hansen has been in Tallahassee, Florida for us all night. So, Tom, what kind of damage are you seeing there? A lot of cleanup going on behind you, as I see.
Oh, that's absolutely right, Juliet. If you can envision this, this was a 60 to 70 foot tree that fell onto this apartment, and we have been covering the damage that we've been seeing pockets in Tallahassee, not widespread. You know, fortunately for this largely densely populated area, the damage has just been in little isolated pockets around the city. The main concern here, though, if you want to look over my shoulder this way, power lines, downed power lines leading to widespread outages, at least in the early part of the day. Now, at last check, the number has dropped from over 1 million this morning across the state of Florida down to the 800,000 range of people who are without power. So it is starting to decrease, but there is still going to be a long path to get things up and running when it comes to electricity. Utility companies saying that it could potentially take days for power to be 100% restored to the state. Juliet.
All right, Tom, thanks so much. Power there with that leaf blower and all of the crews doing what they need to do. But thank you so much, Tom. We'll let you go and appreciate your reporting for us. And as expected, Helene's damage is leaving a lot of people without power right now. This map shows you millions across the southeast in the dark. Over 1 million customers are hoping to get their lights back on soon in Florida. So you can see here a majority of those are in the Big Bend area where Helene made landfall. And Florida Governor Ron DeSantis just started speaking moments ago with an update. Let's listen in.
Everyone is in agreement that power restoration as rapidly as possible really helps with the response and the recovery. You know, you've seen in other parts of the country just recently, people weeks without power for like a Category 1 storm. Here in Florida, we've worked really hard to not have that happen, and that has happened in the past, even here many years ago. So we've had great partners with FPL, TECO, and then Duke. And I think you saw Duke had amassed a lot of linemen in different parts of the state. I think they had Tropicana Field, massive numbers of folks. And then they had at the villages, they had a big area there too. So we've worked closely with Melissa Satius, who's the head of Duke Energy here in Florida. I want to thank her for really leaning in and taking these storms very seriously and really wanting to provide really strong service for their customers, because, you know, you just take it for granted. You know, you turn the light on, you get the charge. But when times like this happen and you can get power on quickly, that really is something that I think a lot of people appreciate. So, Melissa, why don't you come up and update on your efforts?
All right, Florida Governor DeSantis giving an update on the power outages, the serious nature of what happens after Helene hit that area. And he says the cleanup will continue for days, and he thanks all of the people and the rescuers there in his area. Up next, a potential Israeli ground invasion of Lebanon looming. CBS News correspondent Imtiaz Tayeb will have the latest from Beirut. You're watching CBS News 24/7. We'll be right back. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. We are getting new updates on the security threats being monitored by the Department of Justice. Attorney General Merrick Garland gave a news conference earlier today to announce indictments against 3 Iranian operatives accused of hacking former President Trump's campaign. He issued a serious warning saying the U.S. will not tolerate election interference. Take a listen.
We know that Iran is continuing its brazen efforts to stoke discord, erode confidence in the U.S. electoral process, and advance its malign activities to the IRGC, a designated foreign terrorist organization. The Justice Department is committed to countering the threat that Iran poses to our democracy, to our national security, and to our allies in the international community. As we approach the upcoming election, I want to reiterate that the Justice Department will not tolerate attempts by Iran or by any foreign power to interfere in our elections and undermine our democracy. Together with our partners across the federal government, we will use every tool we have to counter and disrupt the efforts of Iran, as well as Russia and China, to exploit our democratic system of government. The message of the U.S. government is clear. The American people, not a foreign power, decide the outcome of our country's elections.
Okay, and this was just released. Garland released this poster to the public. As you can see here, there is a reward available up to $5 million for anyone who has information leading to these suspects. All right, on to New York. Demonstrators took to the streets in Manhattan today as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed world leaders at the United Nations General Assembly. Netanyahu remained defiant and vowed to defeat Hamas and Hezbollah. He also did not mention an internationally backed ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. In fact, Netanyahu says it will continue degrading Hezbollah until it achieves its goals along the Lebanon border.
Israel must also defeat Hezbollah in Lebanon. Hezbollah is the quintessential terror organization in the world today. It has tentacles that span in all continents. It has murdered more Americans and more Frenchmen than any group except bin Laden. It's murdered the citizens of many countries represented in this room. And it has attacked Israel viciously over the last 20 years, in the last year, completely unprovoked. A day after the Hamas massacre, on October 7th, Hezbollah began attacks against Israel, which forced more than 60,000 Israelis on our northern border to leave their homes, becoming refugees in their own land. Hezbollah turned vibrant towns in the north of Israel into ghost towns. So I want you to think about this in equivalent American terms. Just imagine if terrorists turned El Paso and San Diego into ghost towns. Then ask yourself, how long would the American government tolerate that? A day? A week? A month? I doubt they tolerate it even for a single day. Yet Israel has been tolerating this intolerable situation for nearly a year. Well, I've come here today to say enough is enough.
Meantime, a potential Israeli ground invasion of Lebanon looming as new Israeli airstrikes hit Beirut, targeting the central headquarters of Hezbollah. The Lebanese Health Ministry says at least 2 people were killed and dozens of others were injured. CBS News correspondent Imtiaz Tayyab is in Beirut with the very latest for us. Thanks for joining.
Well, there's an extremely alarming situation unfolding here in Beirut, where several loud explosions were heard in the southern part of the city known as Dahia, often described as a Hezbollah stronghold. Now, the images that we've seen, again, of black plumes of smoke over this densely populated area. Now, the Israeli military has confirmed that it was behind those strikes. In fact, I will read part of a statement from the Israeli military spokesman, Daniel Hagari, where he said the Israeli military, attacked Hezbollah's central headquarters, which is located under residential buildings in the heart of Dahia, Beirut. He also went on to say that there is no change in the instructions of the Home Front Command, which is presumably his way of saying this is not the start of what many are fearing, which is a full-scale invasion by Israeli forces. Now, all of this comes at a time when intense diplomacy around the world is underway to try to secure some sort of truce between Israel and Hezbollah. In fact, there was a glimmer of hope that a 21-day truce had been agreed, but Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu dismissing it. Now, we have reports that he is in New York right now attending the UN General Assembly. We've heard reports that he was informed of the strikes here in Beirut and was ushered out of a meeting looking, quote, panicked. But as you can imagine, here in Beirut, more scenes of abject fear for so many Lebanese who have seen the violence here really grip so many of their lives. Juliet.
Thank you. And shortly after the airstrike, Netanyahu's office says the Israeli leader is cutting his visit short to the U.S. and is returning home. All right, our live feed showing you what it looks like right now in Nashville as Helene moves its way through the South. You can see just kind of the day after all of this. And we're going to go to meteorologist Jessica Birch to fill us in on what's happening now.
This is a big update. Just within the past 15 minutes, it went from a tropical storm now to a tropical depression as wind speeds are starting to die down. Now the center of it sitting around 35 miles per hour. It takes about 38 for it to actually be officially a tropical depression. But that doesn't take anything away from what's happened within the 24 hours. This system, even though it's decaying over states like Kentucky all the way over into Tennessee, is still causing a lot of issues. Taking a look behind me, I want to show you where it's currently at and where it's moving to as we head into our weekend forecast. It is Friday. And in our Thursday night, it swept throughout the Gulf Coast, impacting many communities down there, sweeping through Atlanta, where they're still under flash flood watches and warnings right now. And now it's sitting parked just over Tennessee as we head into this weekend's forecast. It continues to circulate throughout that region as it decays and dumps heavy rain throughout those communities. Tropical storm warnings still in effect right now throughout the whole state of South Carolina as they were dealing with some heavy rain just throughout the morning hours today, still lasting into this afternoon. The storm continues to circulate over communities like Nashville, up into Cincinnati, where heavy rainfall, damaging winds, that's the big impact as we head into the next 24 hours. And flood watches remain in effect too. Throughout the Carolinas, stretching down into Atlanta, we've been dealing with heavy rainfall. Anywhere up to around 20 inches is still expected within the next 48 hours. And we also continue to keep a close eye on those winds. Tornado threats stretch all throughout the Carolinas up into Virginia as we head into the evening hours tonight. Juliet.
Jess, thank you. We want to take you back now to New York City. Mayor Eric Adams has pleaded not guilty to 5 federal corruption charges. Adams made no remarks after leaving the courtroom earlier today. He is expected to be back in court on Wednesday. Adams faces a maximum sentence of 45 years in prison if found guilty. All right, let's take a look at other news headlines today. Boeing and union leaders are returning to the negotiating table along with federal mediators. Earlier this week, Boeing gave the group what it called its best and final offer on a contract. The union had until today to vote on the proposal. It's been 2 weeks since this strike started, costing the company an estimated $1.4 billion. And another major strike is looming in the U.S. Dock workers from Maine to Texas say they're prepared to walk off the job on Tuesday. Their contract is set to expire at the end of the month. Demands include a higher wage hike and a guarantee that automation jobs won't replace workers. Experts fear the strike could bring the economy to a halt. That's it for us from our news feeds right now. CBS News 24/7 continues. We're going to leave you now with some pictures from Asheville, North Carolina. Thanks for watching.